Hi guys, Sandra here. Thanks for joining me today. Just a quick video today on a few bits and pieces that you might want in your craft room and a couple of hints and tips. The first one, this happens to be what they call over here plastilina, and it's sold everywhere for kids to play with. This one is the Jovi brand or Hovi brand, and this is like the old-fashioned plasticine that you used to get years ago, in my case. Except for one thing, it doesn't smell like the old plasticine did. I didn't ever like the smell of plasticine. It was a horrible smell and it used to stay on your hands. This stuff doesn't really smell of anything, and it is the same kind of quality as the traditional old-fashioned plasticine that you used to buy in those little strips with little lines through them. In fact, they still sell those. But it's great stuff. You can buy it in all sorts of different colours. You can buy it in small blocks, large blocks. And yeah, just handy. One of the uses I have for it, I've got an old candle holder here, which as you can see has been used and abused. I keep a bit of plasticine in here so I can quickly access it, and it doesn't dry out, so you know it's useful from that point of view. I keep it in here so that if I've got something that I need to keep upright or in a particular position, I can do that. So for example, if I was painting a mug or I was doing some resin, a tiny resin piece, and I just needed it to be upright, stick it into that and then it can't move. So handy thing to have in your stash. On the subject of clay, I have what is effectively a children's pastry roller, but it's silicone. So again, that is really handy to have because nothing much sticks to it. Easy to clean off, you can get paint over it, doesn't matter, you can clean it off again. Now, my other tip is something that you might not have thought of. This is air dry clay, and unfortunately, this one has air dried. I had it sealed up, I had it in a plastic bag, I squeezed as much air as I could out of the plastic bag, and it is still dried out. Bin. This one that I opened at exactly the same time, and it was probably 9 months ago, a year ago. This one is not dried out. It's as soft as it was the day I bought it, because as you can see, I vacuum packed it. Now, if you've got a vacuum sealer in the kitchen, don't forget that when you're in the craft room, because it still has its uses. I've mentioned this sort of thing in videos before, but normally I have had a paper one, and this is a lint roller. This is a different type of lint roller, and as you can see, it's got some of my hair on it and various other dusty specks. It is tacky to touch, and what you do when you've used it, you run it under the tap and you allow it to dry. So this is quite handy if you want to pick up various things around the house, but it's also useful in the craft room because it's very good at picking up bits of glitter and things. In fact, I think this one is actually stickier than the paper version. Dress up gloves. These I can buy in my local Chinese shop. You can usually get them in places that cater for children. I happen to have small hands, so it's not too much of a problem for me with the child size, but if you go into a fancy dress place where they've got costumes for Halloween or Christmas or fiestas or whatever, you can usually find them in adult sizes too. Now this happens to be a child's one, a little bit on the small side, but I could still use it if it was actually a right hand one. This one happens to be a left hand and I'm right-handed. It will still fit me. Okay. Now the reason I might want to use this is during the summer in particular, when my hands get quite warm and I use an iPad. And I find it's very difficult with an iPad then to not stick to the iPad and not to have a certain amount of surface tension there. So this is one that I've adapted from one that had fingers in it. I've just chopped the fingers off. It just glides over it. If I'm drawing and I touch it, it stops my hand from sticking and dragging on the surface of the iPad. And these cost me something like €1.50 for a pair, so cheaper than buying a specialised glove, which I would probably end up losing specifically for use with my iPad. A bow maker. This one I purchased from, I think it was from Hobbycraft many years ago. Just happened to see it and I think it was about a £5. Is it brilliant? No, it's not absolutely wonderful, but it does the job. What I have done is I've put some tack it over and over on the base of it so that when I put it down onto a surface, and okay, it's not slipping on here because this is silicone, but when I put it down on a surface, it will stay put while I am making a bow. If you don't have one of these and you don't want to go buy one, then if you've got someone who does 3D printing, this would be an easy 3D print job. Or if you've got someone who likes to do woodworking, again, the same for that. They could knock one of these up in a couple of minutes. Failing that, if you happen to have anything like this around, and I've got a couple of these in different sizes, don't ask me why, I have no idea, then you can also use this for bow making, but you just need someone to hold it while you do it. It operates in just the same way that that does. All you need is to look at a quick video on how to use a bow maker and you'll be making bows in no time at all. If you want artwork on your walls but you don't really want to drill holes in the walls, maybe you're renting and you really don't want the aggravation, or maybe you're in student accommodation and you just want to put something on the walls that you don't have to actually make holes in the walls for, then think about pieces of plywood. This is just 4mm plywood squares. And what I've done in this particular case is I have coated it with white acrylic, then I played with alcohol inks on it, and to give it this really nice heavily glossed look, you can use two different things. You can either use sticky backed plastic, it'll do the job just as well as anything else, or you can use 1/2 of a laminating folder. This obviously only works if you have relatively small pieces, but I think you'll agree they're quite fun. And to stick these on the walls, all you're going to need is a bit of blue tack. No drilling required. This is a picture I framed myself with an old frame that I had hanging around. Now, the picture frame that I had was faded. It was a cheap wooden frame. It was, I think, navy blue to start off with, and it had faded so that it was navy on one side and it really wasn't very blue on the other. Now, normally you'd probably think, oh, well, okay, I need to paint that again in a navy blue or another colour, but I decided when I did it to do a slightly different effect. So I gave it a base colour, and in this particular case, I think it was black that I had, just with acrylic paint, big brush, you know, take the picture out of the frame if you've got it already in there, and just repaint it whatever colour, base colour you fancy. But I didn't actually want it to look like that. I wanted this faux metal look. So all I did was I got some silver acrylic paint and a sponge and just sponged it on randomly, not making it so that it was all smooth, but leaving the rough edges. I happen to like the effect of this. It looks really quite nice on the wall, and it's a cheap way of reusing an old frame. I've mentioned this one before, but I think it's so useful it's worth mentioning it again. I bought metallic flakes. They're not real metal, but they certainly look very metallic. Buy them in a jar, but they're quite large. If you want tiny, tiny little glints of metal, put them in a salt or pepper grinder like I've got here, and then when you want to, you just twist it like you would salt or pepper, and you end up with just a little bit of sparkle when you want it. The thing that I've got on my finger here is basically designed for those using nail gels who want to soak their nails, which I certainly don't. But they're quite handy if you're doing anything with something which is going to be a little hot, or indeed if you just want to stop your fingertips putting fingerprints on things at the time. Quite useful little things to have around. They will also stop your fingertips and your nails from absorbing ink if you're playing around with alcohol inks. So you might want to consider having some of these on hand.